All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. I've got some changes to Breya that I've made recently, and I'll run you through some games afterwards. The main changes in the deck is that I've been trying to get the mana curve lower and have the early game be the early game development be more consistent, more reliable, while also having increased disruption against other opponents trying to do the same thing. Combo can definitely be a problem for Breya. Just aggressive starts with the right setup can always be a challenge, and I just thought it'd be wise to have more ways to get in my opponent's hand, kind of disrupt what they're doing, and at the same time give my hand a little bit more resilience against early game mulligans. So what I decided to do was a number of different things. First of all, Urza and Teferi, both out 5 and 4 drops that I absolutely love. They're super powerful, fun to play, do great things, but very difficult to justify. Like, you don't want to see them in your opening hand. You mulligan them all the time, but they can sometimes be the cause of your mulligan. Those two cards have come out, and in addition to removing those cards, I've removed exactly one land. I actually removed Plateau. I've got Rogram Triome, and I'm always fetching this thing, and I'm like never fetching Plateau, so I figured I could probably just cut it, the Plateau, and it should be fine. I'd really like it if they would print Triomes for the on-color cards as well, so then I could consider dumping like Badlands and Scrubland, for example, potentially. But at any rate, Triome is in. Was in before I was at 31 lands. I went down to 30. It feels okay. To help with the land cuts, I actually added Night's Whisper. So this is just one of those cards that probably should be in. Probably always should have been in. It's such a compact little card drawing spell. 2 cards for 2 mana is just really, really good, and something you always want to see, in your opening hands, as long as you have the mana to cast it, right? Like you're almost always going to feel good about drawing Night's Whisper at any point in the game, starting from your opening hand to top decking, right? This card's just one of those cards that you just always want to draw. So why wasn't I playing it? I don't know, but I am now. So Night's Whisper's in. I actually ended up cutting a Braid. I feel like Rep Apart is probably better for that slot, and I just don't have extra slots. I also cut the blue-red Talisman, and I added a number of different things here. I added Sword of Feast and Famine is now in the deck. Thoughtseize is in the deck. Inquisition of Kozilek and the rest are all in the deck. So in addition to all those cuts, I also cut Sensei's Divining Top. So a lot of funky stuff going on here, right? We've got Teferi, Urza, Sensei's Divining Top, blue-red Talisman, Plateau, and a Braid all out. That's 6 cards out, and we've got 3 black spells, 4 black spells in here, and then Sword of Feast and Famine 5, and then Yawgmoth's Will 6. So 5 black cards came in, and then 1 Sword of Feast and Famine. And Sword is in here as the singleton orb cheater for when you don't have any other way to do it. Previously we had Urza, now we've got Sword. I think that's acceptable. The main thing here is, if you notice, we're getting more discard into the decks. We want to be more disruptive, and Urza's not as disruptive. It's much harder to play when you're playing against hard deck. Like, Sword is better against stronger decks, generally speaking, than Urza is, just because it's easier you can cheat it out with Stoneforge and so forth. You can cheat it out with Workshop, and it puts a lot of pressure on their ability to like combo out, for example, or kill you with card advantage when you can constantly hit their hand. And it of course allows you to play cards and then get your mana back, which is pretty serious deal in a control deck. Just all around good card, and I kind of missed it, so glad to have it back. Yawgmoth's Will, with these extra value cards, so with the Night's Whisper, Duress, Inquisition, and Thoughtseize all added into the deck, Yawgmoth's Will gets a lot stronger because it has a much higher potential to just pick up a fetch land, something that maybe your opponent killed, if you're lucky, something like a Ponder or a Preordain, and then like Duress your opponent. And plays like that might not seem that incredible. Played a land, played a ponder into rest, but that turns Yawgmoth's Will just in that scenario that I outlined into ancestral recall worth of value, and that's good enough. And then of course there's the games where you can do some really funky stuff by sacking or retrieving cheap artifacts that we've sacrificed to Breya at some point. Being able to just recur mana crypt and stuff, or having a early your opponent killing these things and then being able to get them all back. And I've been using Will for a long time, so surely if you've been watching the channel, you've seen the value of it. But it was at a point where when the higher end, when the deck was packed with, I had 2 more 4-drops and 2 more 5-drops and less 1s and 2s, and Will was feeling really weak. And if Will is feeling weak, I suspect that one solution is to pull Will, but another solution is make your deck better, more suitable for Will, just because Will's that good. And I think that that's probably mostly the right thing to do, the right way to handle it. It's probably better to just make your deck stronger, by which, get your curve down and be able to abuse this card better. That's generally speaking going to be the right answer. So, and it does some really cool stuff in addition with some of the new cards. For example, you might kill something with Portable Hole, sack the hole to Breya, and then replay Will. And if the thing you killed was a commander, like a cheap commander, like if they're playing Jace or something, the 2-drop, or let's say Rogvin, or let's say you exile a token with it, or maybe you exile a permanent that just doesn't matter anymore. For example, you get to a point in the game where you've got Narset out, and you had Portable Hold their Sylvan Library, so now you can sack it and kill something else that they have, and then replay it and exile something else they have off the Will. So stuff like that, pretty cool. And overall, I will say the deck feels really good. Now, the games that I'm going to run you through today, I think I had a Braid in and not Night's Whisper, but I should have had Night's Whisper. Braid does come in handy, of course. It's just a great card, but overall, the Whisper, I do believe, will prove stronger in the long run. So let's get to the games now, and that was last 7 days or today. Let's see. Got all results. Yep, we've got a loss here. I lost this game against Hash1. I'll go ahead and run you through it. And this was the game that kind of prompted me to go back and take a look and realize that I just needed more disruption, because first of all, I am playing against Tymna Kraum. So my opponent and I are playing the same color combination, but my opponent gets to use Jeweled Lotus, and my opponent gets to have an opening hand of 7+2 cards, and I get an opening hand of 7+1. And I can't use Jeweled Lotus really for Breya, so I've already at a huge disadvantage. But we'll just kind of run through what happens here. I do at least have potentially a way to stop Tymna. My opponent's going to get a card first. And here's the worst thing. There's a bug in Magic Online with Jeweled Lotus. See, the extra commander mana is not emptying the pool, and he can actually spend that on Kraum on the colorless, or he could replay Tymna with it. Just kind of unfair deal here. Now, this might look a little strange what I'm doing here, but I'm actually threatening to activate Urza's Saga here and block and kill his Tymna the Weaver with a construct. So my opponent does not attack here, and I'm able to, of course, get the construct out to stop Tymna from hitting me in the face. So, and I kind of decide here that I'd rather develop than produce another construct. So go after my opponent's mana a bit, play a Ready. Opponent has Force and Negation, so I play Fierce Guardianship, and my opponent has another free counter. So these free counters are just so... Exiles a Mental Misstep, another free counter, right? Free counters are so kind of ridiculous. But, I mean, I should have stabilized here, you'd think. But, nope. Cabal Ritual, Dockside Extortionist into Crom, and of course he gets to spend the white mana and save himself a treasure, but my opponent actually sacked an extra treasure there in order to be a good sport, which was super awesome. I appreciated that. Anyway, I get Breya down. The Stockside Extortionist was heinous, but not as bad as it's about to get. Opponent's down to 2 cards. You wouldn't think that I would be dead here, but I'm about to get comboed out, so I'm gonna, obviously block and block. And then my opponent plays Underworld Breach, and now has Dockside Extortionist to produce all the mana that he needs here, and cast Limdol's Vault, and that's the end of the game. And why is that the end of the game? Well, the reason is opponent goes and gets Brain Freeze, and then plays Ponder out of the graveyard into the Brain Freeze, so exiling like 3, Jeweled Lotus, Deflecting Swat Force. Gets the Brain Freeze in hand, plays the Brain Freeze, and then at that point the Storm count is, 4 or 5? So Brain Freezes himself, and of course Underworld Breach does not have the clause, the safety clause that Yawgmoth's Will has, so he would put like 21 cards in the graveyard, and then he can just use those cards to replay Lotus Petal, and then replay Brain Freeze. So basically my opponent's going to be able to put his whole deck into the graveyard, and then from there he uses a portion of it with Lotus Petal to generate the mana he needs, and plays Thassa's Oracle, and I die. Or basically any other win con at that point, but Thassa's Oracle is the easiest one. Yeah, it's pretty insane that 1 Underground Sea and 1 Felwar Stone allowed, and only 2 cards in hand was enough for my opponent to combo me out. But such is the power of Underworld Breach, an enchantment that's broken beyond like reason. But I'm not a fan of this card whatsoever. But props to Hash One for navigating that victory there. And I decided, like I said, that I wanted to get more disruption for combo decks, so I went ahead and you can see it was on the 10th. I played like 1 more game and I was like, I'm done. And after that, I'm not sure what my camera's doing. I'm going to see if I can. It's going to stop. Yeah. So then after that, I went and sort of made adjustments to the deck, mostly essentially what you see, but minus the, like I said, the Abrade was still in, not the Night's Whisper. But the rest, and then we start on the 12th and run through the 14th, and you can see, of course, I haven't faced Hash 1 since then, and I'm due for getting my butt kicked. But in the meantime, against random opponents here, I did have a string of unbroken victories, including this session against a super salty Dream Crusher who got more and more salty, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run through this series here at the end, and I'm just going to start on the 14th and just play like the most current version from today, and then we'll go back and we'll look at the Dream Crushers salty games there, and then I think I'll call it a night. I'm not going to spin through every single match on the 12th because I'd like to run through. I'd like to get through the video, basically. So we'll start with Swamp Serpent. And this is today. And Swamp Serpent, I have to take a mulligan, so I mulligan into this, is playing Tymna and Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro. So anytime the opponent's playing Tymna is always rough here. And I duress my opponent. I'm going to pause. Play Crypt and Talisman. So what do I see? I see this. So my opponent then top decks a Godless Shrine, and clearly they're trying to put together some kind of combo, and of course I have to watch out for Tymna as well, so all somewhat bad here. I need to also kind of start getting some cards back into my hand, so I Vampiric Tutor for Crucible, figuring that this way I can ensure that I'll get Breya down to stop Tymna. My opponent plays their Plains, so we'll check that off the list. I don't actually think I drew a Dark Confidant here, so hopefully we're not bugging out, but we'll see. So that stops the Tymna. I'm gonna block, obviously. If he's got a trick, he's got a trick. That's not that important, but actually has no trick, so I'm not quite sure why he sent in. And then I realized what's going on. So my opponent actually put has Nico, Eris, Timna the Weaver. I could have swore he had another creature, but in his graveyard. I think this is a bugged game because my opponent was setting up for a Revile Arc, basically. Yeah, I didn't draw Merchant Scroll here. This game was a little bit more difficult than this. Anyway, I end up countering the Revile Arc, and opponent does some kind of Snapcaster shenanigans at some point, which I did force a negation, but I don't remember the rest of what happens. But I do remember that I countered Revile Arc, and I believe I countered Karmic Guide, and it was those two things that caused my opponent to scoop this game. So apologies for the game not spinning out properly, but Magic Online. Anyway, Black Monday was the next opponent. It's so hard to make videos. And here I am playing against Black Monday, running the Get Rog monster, and I've got a pretty slow start, but it does have some good potential given that Stoneforge can get Sword of Feast and Famine, and Sword of Feast and Famine, oh yeah, that's before I got the old bordered version, but Sword of Feast and Famine is pretty good against the black-green deck, so as you would expect. So right here, I'm just going to strip the Bayou and stall, because if I don't have to mana leak here, great, and if I do need to mana leak here, I can do it. If I don't, then I get to put the sword into play. Opponent plays Mesmeric Orb, and that is not a mana leak target, so we're going to go ahead and just cheat that sword into play. And I mill off Yawgmoth's Will, Factor Fiction, and a land. Fine. Equip Stoneforge and send in. Opponent doesn't even have black mana or green, so I'm not worried about the sword going away, and I'm certainly not worried about the creature dying. And so I do get to untap, and then I decide I'm just going to sit on a counter rather than, excuse me for the hiccups, rather than vindicating here. Opponent swings in, I take some damage, mill off a few more cards. My turn, I Crucible, Recur, and a Wasteland, and then untap my lands, which of course mills me. And finally decide, you know what, I'm going to vindicate that Cobra, and I think I'm okay on the mana leak. And my opponent thinks so too. At this point, I'm now strip mining, and I'm wastelanding and hitting my opponent with a sword, so they can't keep their cards, they can't play their cards, and game's over. All right, so that was Black Monday. I did make some switches in the cards I'm using, is what I noticed. I found Old Border Sword of Feast and Famine, an Old Border Trinket Mage, an Old Border Remand, an Old Border Ponder, and what was the other Old Border card that I found? Misty Sanctuary. Oh, and Thoughtseize. These were the ones that I found. I was really excited to find these cards. What I'm looking for, incidentally, there's apparently an Old Border Liquimetal Torque, Prismatic Ending, and then the off-color fetches. So Arid Mesa, Marsh Flats, Misty Rainforest, and so forth. If anyone happens to have any of those cards in Old Border Foil, I'm very interested in acquiring those, and I would very much like to trade with you for those cards. Trade you tickets or cards, whatever you prefer. Tickets most likely. Anyway, so that was it though. Black Monday. We're going to move on to Dr. Levin Game 1, and then we have a Dr. Levin Game 2. One of the games in here is a little bit confusing. My opponent actually was in a position that I assumed was a winning position and scooped, but this isn't that one. So Dr. Levin, I duress right away, and I'm able to take a Demonic Tutor out of their hand. Very nice. Opponent then plays Fabled Passage Pass, and I just play Wooded Foothills Pass. Opponent runs out the swamp that we know about, and I go ahead and just get Rogran Triome. This is great because I can actually get, so because this isn't a plateau, right, I would have normally gotten Volcanic there, but then I wouldn't have a way to cast Vindicate this turn. So in the past, I would have had to get, in that case, I would have had to get Plateau in order to be able to cast Vindicate, but then I don't have 2 blue. Thank goodness I have Rogran Triome, and now I could just get the Triome, and I have 2 blue, plus I can cast Vindicate, which is great. I don't, of course, play the Swamp because I'm actually attacking my opponent's black. I see a double black card over there in his hand earlier. So I intend to not play the Urborg until I've got so much tempo that it doesn't matter. But here my opponent just scoops and says he shouldn't have kept the hand. He was mana screwed, and of course my mana attack didn't help him. So we move on to game 2, and same thing. Opponent's playing Alara, and I lead off with just a tapped Mystic Sanctuary, and pass for the turn. Opponent has a command tower, no play, which is very nice. So I get the Marsh Flats pass. And he starts doing his thing. So, sorry for the yawning. Anyway, I get Triome there. Play use my City of Brass. Play Spellseeker and go get what did I go get? Yeah, Vamp. Anyway, so this creature is gonna kind of grow its toughness based on his devotion and give my opponent life. This creature gives my opponent life and takes my life away. So all kind of nasty stuff there. Factor Fiction here off of a upkeep tutor for Crypt, and it gets me more mana, which is what I was looking for. I'm hoping to get a nice little Mind Twist going here soon. I'm going to place Blood Artist, which is going to cause more loss of life and gaining of life and Soul's Attendant, which, sticks with the theme. Alright, time to go after my opponent's hand, so we'll dump truck that and pass for the turn. I'm not quite ready to play Narset and just throw it into the meat grinder. Plus I can just sit on Mana Leak here. So I'm going to take some more damage from these creatures, and that's it. My opponent's got nothing in hand at the moment. I draw a Vindicate, so I decide what I need to do, first of all, is try to slow the bleeding, so I'm going to get Breya out. And I do have at least Force. In case something gnarly happens, like, I don't know, Armageddon or something. Or Skull Clamp. And instead what happens is my opponent plays Book of Exalted Deeds. So you gain 3 or more life, create a 3/3 white angel token. And I was thinking, how did my opponent gain 3 life this turn? They gained... Like, what did I miss? They gained 1 off of Drana's Emissary. Oh, and 2 off of Alara. So this thing triggered off a single life. That's what I was missing, was the Alara. But anyway, I did choose to... I would have chosen to leave it there anyway because I have the Vandal Blast, and it makes my Vandal Blast good. But that was pretty interesting. I was like, how did he get an angel? And it's only in review that we see these things sometimes, so... Alright, so end of my opponent's turn. I'm going to eat some damage. But I have to kill Blood Artist, or I'm going to take even more as we go through the rest of this game, and I'm kind of hurting over here on 12. So, alright, for my turn, go ahead and play the Opal. Use it for a Vandal Blast. And I'm thinking, like, struggling to figure out exactly how I want to do this. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and play Narset, and I tutor up a Portable Hole, which is really nice. So the hole actually allows me to kill Angel, and then it gives me Breya fuel for the next target, which is really good. So now I can sit on Mana Leak, so I take some more damage. My opponent plays Rock's Faith Mender, which means he gains double life, so I'm not going to counter that. I don't care about life gain. And go ahead and kill the flyer that's been damaging me. Dig for a little bit more land here. And I actually orb my opponent here and pass. And then at the end of their was that main phase? Oh yeah, I tutor up Muddle. I muddle into Jitte. Opponent says he hates Winter Orb, so I went ahead and got rid of it. Yeah, I was planning to get rid of it anyway, to be honest. So I kill his Suture Priest, kill Mox Opal, kill Winter Orb, put Jitte on Breya and swing in, and kill his Rock's Faith Mender. And at this point, I'm feeling pretty good. Got 2 counters. Opponent's got pretty much nothing. And yeah, just gonna remove the blocker and attack. Get some more counters on Jitte, and Jitte just does what Jitte does. Clears the board out, makes me semi-invincible. I go ahead and delete my opponent's swamp from the board there. And then, of course, and I ironically draw Urborg. Probably should have killed the command tower, but I don't know. Honestly, it probably also doesn't matter. Opponent's at 88, but 12 points of commander damage. And I think we are in bugged game territory. But yeah, I think we're bugging out. So I don't know what the game's going to tell us we do here. Yeah, I have no idea why I would tap Ancient Tomb there and not attack. But anyway, as you can see, this part, it did happen. I did pump Breya up to a 10-10 and attack, and my opponent ended the game at 80 life, but dead to commander damage. So, which just saved time, obviously. Like, I was in control of the game, and I could have gone... We could have played probably the rest of the life total, and it still would have ended the same way, but in that case, it worked out fine. Yeah, so here you see I have a Braid instead of Night's Whisper, and wouldn't I rather have Night's Whisper? Absolutely, right? First of all, getting black is better than getting red mana. Here, of course, I end up getting Rogan Triome because, you know, it gets me both red for a Braid and white for Swords to Plowshares, but... Alright, so opponent has an Elvish Mystic. I Impulse. I find myself a Mana Vault and then draw a Badlands, which is nice. I use that for the Mana Vault. Play a Coalition Relic, and I've got Saga. And my opponent actually says he's new to Magic Online, so you can see some definite errors happening there. It might be new to Magic in general, but misses this Urza Saga surprise block here. He does tell me it was a good play, which I appreciate. It's so nice to have somebody be a good sport, since it's so rare. And he Rexaged my Mana Vault there instead of Rexaging my Coalition Relic. So obviously, you know, that's just a little bit of something that you pick up in time, and didn't really make a lot of sense for the board situation, but can't fault a new opponent, new player. So, you know, game's not incredibly serious at this point, right? But I'm just in Urza Saga recursion shenanigans, and of course a Braid there was fine. A Braid's always fine when it does what it's supposed to do, which is most of the time, but I didn't need it, and certainly drawing more cards might have been sweeter. So I don't feel bad about making that swap at all. Obviously, we're just kind of going through the motions here anyway, though. And grab myself a Mox and attack for 20. So now I've got gross amounts of threats in play. When it manages to shrink some of them. I couldn't remember what Menace did. I was thinking it was Fear, so turns out it takes 2 creatures to block, so I just Swords to Plowshares instead. Alright, making a Construct, making a guy, replaying Urza Saga again. I could have, but we're good. I've got 40-40 worth of robots in play, all for 0 mana investment on the Saga, other than the 2 lands, 2 mana I put into that. I think that was pretty good. Alright, so we'll run through Master of Nature here. But hopefully Russell does continue to play Magic Online and hopefully enjoys himself. Alright, so the Derevi is my opponent. My opponent, Master of Nature playing Derevi. So this is always like I don't typically enjoy facing Derevi. It's such a hoser, right? So I'm going to Imperial Seal here, and I make a bad choice. So the correct choice here was Cavern of Souls. Should have got Cavern of Souls, and then this turn I just play Cavern, cast my commander, and then from there I've got Derevi under control, and then once Derevi's under control, then I can focus on the rest of the game. But I got a little greedy. I went for Urza Saga, and I mean, you can kind of see why here. Of course, my opponent didn't have the Soul Ring at the time. The idea is that Saga will get... and look at this, my opponent... Okay, I got to pause here. So this is a really weird scenario. So my plan was to make some robots and get mana, fast mana, and pressure my opponent and kind of like make it hard for them to really leverage their commander. But Here, my opponent actually plays Sylvan Library and plays it with 1 mana floating, which means for 4 mana, they can flash their commander out and tap one of my lands, or for 3 mana, they could just hard cast their heavy. Either way, I decide that what I'm going to do is I need to tap my opponent's mana so that I can resolve my response to Sylvan Library, so I end up wasting a mana leak, and my opponent wisely pays to get their Sylvan in play. And now I have to Vampiric Tutor. And I'm in this horrible spot because I'm almost completely out of cards due to the Imperial Seal, Mana Leak, and Vamp. So normally this is the point where you go and get card draw. And of course, for example, Jace would be exceptional, right? But the problem is my opponent is a Sylvan, and my card draw could very well be answered quickly by my opponent, and I don't want them to have an active Sylvan. So I'm trying to rack my brains. What is card draw that also deals with Sylvan? And maybe you can figure out what the answer is. And of course, this means that I'm not going to get to make a robot with Saga. Throws that plan off. But the answer is Narset. So I'll play Narset and take a peek, and I find Rip Apart, which means that I can deal with Derevi when Derevi sneaks into play. And Sylvan Library is off for now. And then my opponent slams Winter Orb here. And I've got to tell you, you've got 5 lands, and I've got 2, one of which is about to die and make an artifact mana, so I literally have 1 land. He's Winter Orbing 5 of his lands. It's a Winter Orb 1 of mine. Not the greatest choice in the world there. Opponent does decide to cheat out the Derevi here, taps a Signet. But I just showed him Rip Apart. So luckily I draw a land here. I can't use Urza, but and I Narset and miss. So my card draw it did get 1 card this game, but I miss. So I decide, because I drew a land, to Toxic Deluge and kill their commander and then destroy their Soul Ring and make life under the Winter Orb really painful for them. So on the next turn I find a Force of Negation and pass, and luckily my opponent does not have Derevi in play. Of course, it costs 5 mana the normal way. Opponent then plays a Search for Azcanta, which I think about but allow to resolve because it's pretty weak under a Winter Orb, and I'm hoping to leave that Winter Orb in play. I get a Talisman here off the top, which is really nice because now I only have to tap 1 land for Breya, but risky in the sense that I can't activate Breya. I could have held the Talisman, but I think this makes more sense in the long run. It's a low risk because they would have to have a heck of a draw in order to Treachery it, for example. And if they Gilded Draked the Breya, I guess that would have been the worst thing that could have happened to me. And bad, for sure. But no, I'm doing okay. So my opponent's throwing cards in the graveyard with Search for Azcanta. And so they're getting a slight higher quality of hand draw. And now we see what's happening. Sorry about that. So now we see what's happening. I actually top deck for my turn an Inquisition of Kozilek and Inquisition my opponent. And what my opponent was sitting on was Pondify, Time Twister, Preordain, Remand. Card draw, card draw, card draw. So Narset was huge this game. And I decided to take the Remand since I have Force of Negation to interact with the other cards. And although Pondify could kill my Breya and leave me with a 3/3 and then kind of give them a window to get Derevi into play, it's still hard for them to really kind of make that work in their favor. So I decided that that's okay. I definitely, with a hand like that though, I absolutely must protect Narset, right? At all costs. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I stop attacking with Thopters because now I know my opponent could end of turn sneak Pondify Breya and then sneak Derevi into play and then attack and kill Narset if I were to swing in with all 3. Alright, so I'm going to swing in with Breya just alone again, and then I get a Value Will, and at that point my opponent's had enough. So I'm going to Value Will, and from there I can Inquisition a card out of my opponent's hand, which I would just take the Pondify, so then they're reduced to just Preordained Time Twister facing a Narset. So for 1 black, and then I can Vampiric Tutor or Imperial Seal, and probably Imperial Seal in case I drew Snapcaster, and go get something like Necropotence to seal this game up. And I get to also replay Urza's Saga here. And I could rip apart Search for Azcanta, Sylvan, or Winter Orb, but this isn't doing anything. Winter Orb is helping me, and Search for Azcanta is about to be pretty useless. As soon as it flips, it'll just be extra mana. So not really worth my spending my mana since I need to keep Force of Negation up. So like I said, we will here 1 mana, play the Saga, and then I've got 4 mana up. Even if my opponent draws a Strip Mine, I can still cast Force of Negation. So nice game there. I felt good about that one. And we move on to the next game, and it's against King Kill. And this opponent, I don't know, they got frustrated and quit because I had to think really hard, and I felt bad here. But this entire game is going to be... the entire game is going to be so my opponent King Kill is playing Erebos there, God of the Dead, and this entire game is predicated like the reason that my opponent does well this game is strictly because I had a double mulligan and I decided to tuck that Strip Mine instead of Vedalken Shackles. I don't know why I kept Shackles against Erebos. That was foolish. Absolutely should have kept the Strip Mine, and I'm gonna pay like throughout the course of this game. So I'm gonna the rest of my opponent, and what I see, well, Thoughtseize my opponent, is Mind Twist, which I take, Edict, Liliana Vest, Whip of Erebos, Cabal Coffers, Hero's Downfall. So whatever they tutored for was either Coffers or Urborg, and I cannot get that Urborg dealt with or the Coffers dealt with, and it's gonna just get worse from here. It gets so bad. My opponent gets Thespian Sage and can now copy the Coffers. And notice that they have like no swamps, just the Urborg over there. So I go ahead and I fetch for a swamp because I intend to kill the Urborg at the first opportunity, and I need to have black mana. I've been using my opponent's black. So I Thoughtseize my opponent again. We'll get rid of the duplicates. And Edict, Whip, Hero's Downfall, Phyrexian Obliterator is what I'm facing. Opponent is now producing obscene amounts of mana, and I just have to let him do it and hope that they play the Obliterator, and he does. He walks into my trap, which was, thank goodness. So I now Deluge and Inquisition my opponent. And my opponent has now got a Whip and an Edict, and they Vampiric Tutored in response. Getting Deserted Temple, which allows them to pump the Cabal Coffers. Look at this. This is just gross. Look how much mana my opponent's producing. Goes for Erebos, and I decide that I need to mana leak it to try to stall. And my opponent plays Whip of Erebos. And so there is something of a plan here, but it's a very forlorn hope, right? So I go ahead and get Breya down and play a free Shackles. And I have 1 more mana, and I could sack the Mana Vault, but it doesn't really make sense to do so, so I just pass. Don't need to spend my mana just to spend my mana. That's a resource I can use later, potentially. Opponent's generating so much mana, and drew a Dark Petition right off the top there. And Petition gets Null Profusion. So whenever my opponent, his maximum hand size is 2, but whenever he plays a card, he draws a card. This is insane, and this card is just backbreakingly good at this point. Opponent's now, and it reanimates their Phyrexian Obliterator, kills my flyers, plays a Soul Ring. Remember, each time they're drawing a card, I have no idea what's in his hand. He has 1 card exactly, and I finally draw a Strip Mine. So I steal the Obliterator because it's a 4/5 thanks to the Animate Dead, and I can finally Strip Mine this stupid Urborg that's been wrecking me all game. And then my opponent only has 1 swamp, and they've got like multiple Cabal Coffers, so I should be okay. But the damage is done because of Null Profusion, so my opponent plays a swamp, gets to draw a card, produces a bunch of mana, and then realizes he doesn't have enough mana and passes. So I get a reprieve. So I go ahead and use that opportunity to untap Mana Vault and draw, and I got Will, and I can't play it this turn. It's so bad that I untapped the Vault there. But opponent has a 3rd swamp now, can now play Erebos. So now I've got to deal with Erebos, and I have a very crafty play here. So first I send in with this thing because it punishes him for blocking. My opponent's not going to block. And then what I have to do is I tap 3 mana, and I'm going to sack the Shackles and the Vault to Will, to Breya, in order to set up a Will. So I'm going to advance through this a little bit at a time. So I sack them both. Oops. No. Oh, holy crap. That is so annoying. Pause. I definitely hit the wrong button. I wish I knew what I thought it was just skip one step. Anyway, so I sack the Shackles and the Vault in order to shrink my opponent's commander, and then will and replay a black source and use the black source to get into my opponent's hand, I think. Yeah, Thoughtseize my opponent, and replay the untapped Fedalkin Shackles and steal my opponent's commander for good. And I think I might have, yeah. So that's it. Unfortunately, I can't afford to strip mine here, so these Cabal coffers are just just out of control, right? But my opponent should be mostly out of gas. Not exactly. They've got Null Profusion running, so now they've got doubling all their black mana. So now their mana is just off the rails, right? And I use Erebos to draw some cards. Opponent's plays a destruction on his own creature just to cycle through and draw a card. I'm not going to force a will that. Please read the bones here. I thought about force a willing this, but I mean, I kind of have to like save force a will. I can't stop their card draw anyway, so I kind of have to just let their card draw go and save force a will for something that's going to crush me, which is already happening because of Null Profusion. So like this, whenever I cast a spell, I lose 5 life is a card that I obviously can't stay in play. So I have to force that, unfortunately. I couldn't even afford to remand it because if I remanded the card, I would have... they have enough mana off of what they're doing over there to have replayed it. So at this point now, I have a long think, and I think pretty hard and decide to Vampiric Tutor, and I decide to go get Dak Faden, and I steal their Caged Sun, which means that my black creatures are bigger and my black lands will produce double. And I grab an extra card off of Erebos, and then my opponent concedes, and I have no idea why. I took a long think, don't get me wrong, like my clock dipped, I'm 6 minutes under this opponent, but he says something about ZZZZ. And then, but they didn't concede. The opponent didn't concede until after I stole the Caged Sun and they drew a card. So did they look at their hand and say, well, this is no good or something? The only thing I could think was that, like, because he's got the whip, right? So if my opponent had like 2 creature removal spells and no targets, and they didn't realize they have the whip and a creature, because what he should have done was sneak the Obliterator into play and kill the Dak Faden, and then play his creature removal on it to start drawing cards off of the Null Profusion. But yeah, no idea. But or maybe, I mean, I don't know what else. Maybe they played a land and then drew, and maybe both of the cards in my opponent's hand were land, and he just didn't want to run through it. But at any rate, on my turn, I could have Vampiric Tutor, or I could have Imperial Sealed, and then Erebosed the card into my hand using a single Watery Grave plus Cavern of Souls, because remember, whenever I tap, what is it? There we go. Whenever a land gives me black, I get 1 additional mana. So actually, I wouldn't use Cavern of Souls because it makes black. Probably I would have used something like Watery Grave and Mystic Sanctuary, Imperial Seal, and then Erebos the card into my hand, and get rid of Null Profusion and try to get in the game somehow. It's not looking pretty. Anyway, pretty funky, and all of it was because I mulliganed that strip mine. So I was kind of glad to get the win, but kind of sad that I didn't know why I got the win. If it was from if they were just frustrated, or if they bricked, But hey, I guess a win's a win. So anyway, new game is against Gretchen Titch. Well, Lotus Bomb playing Gretchen Titch Willow, and it's a pretty slow commander, but cool. Anyway, they foretell a card. I sit on a turn 1 mana drain rather than running out Talisman. Go get Rugger and Trio, as I almost always will. Play a Talisman of Dominance, and I do it this way so that if I left a land untapped here, my opponent could just strip mine and then make a play. Anyway, this card is an Icy Manipulator for artifacts too, and because I'm a little bit shy on mana and I just want to get my mana into play, I decide to go ahead and mana drain it here. It's strictly a tempo play, not a great play, honestly. Like, I'm not super happy about it, but not horrible. What a Raven form is my commander, so interesting. And that was apparently the foretold card. And I top deck World's Best Brainstorm here, finding myself Tezzeret and Spellseeker, just gnarly. So I Tezzeret, and I go ahead and get a Crucible, so now I have essentially card draw, as well as Disruption for non-basics. But I'm going to be able to use these lands over here. My opponent actually emergency sequences out a basic land, so I can't strip that, and for my turn I draw Expedition Map, don't even have to use Tezzeret. So I just go get Strip Mine, attack their green, untap some lands, play Spellseeker, and just because it's the least valuable removal I have, I go ahead and abrade their creature and then send in with my 3 flyers. Of course, now I wouldn't have Abrade, I would have probably Swords of Plowshares it and then just charge my Coalition Relic, but whatever. And at that point, yeah, the game is over. Kind of an interesting one against Lotus Bomb. Anyway, after that, we've got a couple ones against C, Moreno 17, and this opponent, I'm not sure why they joined my game, because they were just in the mood to concede or something. But playing Omnath here, and I get to lead off with Urza's Saga. Opponent plays Forest, nothing, and I draw Thoughtseize. So I go ahead and go to fire off the Thoughtseize, and my opponent just concedes. I have no idea what was going on there, and then joins another game against me. So weird. I didn't even actually play the Thoughtseize. You might think that I had played it, and the replay just didn't show that part, but no. Anyway, I have to mulligan here, and I decided to mulligan a Thoughtseize away and keep a Workshop just because I need extra land for Mox Diamond. My opponent has a heck of a start. All I've got here is a counterspell and a hope that it's enough, right? And a Vindicate if I can get there. Opponent goes for Kadama's Reach, not Omnath, which I'm very happy to counterspell a card that isn't a commander. So go ahead and counter that, and then for my turn, I have 1 land and a Vindicate, and we'll see if it's enough. And apparently it is. Opponent doesn't even draw to see what they get. They just decide to scoop on the spot. So, okay. And finally, I've got this game against Ruach, and then I'll do the Dream Crushers. I think I might save that for, well, no, I'll do it at the end here. I'm getting a little bit run down, but that'll be all right. So I end up mulliganing. I'm playing against Porphyros, and this game was just absolutely crazy how aggressive my opponent is. And I made some maybe questionable decisions early on. But I go ahead and get Crucible here because I really need mana. Opponent has a Generator's Servant. So, and maybe that was not right, but I mean, it's decent, right? This is going to get me a few mana sources. So far, so good. Porphyros, I get a tap blue, so I've got 2 blue. This is the part where I probably screwed up. I needed to just be done, but instead I get Tezzeret, and I get Winter Orb, and my opponent punishes me hard. Plays Dwarven Mine, which is going to smack me. Chandra, Acolyte of Flame, which makes 2/1/1 elementals. He can now rush in and kill Tezzeret, hit me in the face, and I take 4 damage from the elementals. And now that my opponent's got a nasty engine over there, so go ahead and preordain away Brainstorm and find myself a Mox Diamond, but I can't do anything with this. Opponent's kicking up all kinds of guys using devastating summons, sacking a bunch of lands, and I am regretting that Winter Orb. And just like that, I'm at 10 life. It's just crazy, right? So I'm going to go ahead and play Breya and try to stabilize, but look what's going on over there. All right, and then my opponent plays Force of Rage at the end of my turn, so creates 2/3/1 elementals with tramples, which Porphyros, it deals 4 more damage to me. So now we're going to step through this a little bit at a time, right? So it's my opponent's upkeep, and during their upkeep, I decide nothing. I can't counter spell right here, so opponent sacrifices their Generator Servant to get 2 haste mana, and uses their Springleaf Drum on a dwarf and then taps red. So they've got 4 mana over here. And plays... Come on. I didn't mean to step it out this slow. Pia, and I didn't need to see every mana disappearing from their mana pool. Pia and Kirin Noir. So this is going to come into play and deal 2 to me with Porphyros, make 2 1/1 flyers, and deal 2 to me and 2 to me. So this is going to take me to 1 life, which then they'll activate Chandra, and that's going to kill me. Not good. But I've got a little trick here. So maybe you can figure out what to do. Of course I can gain life, but Pia and Kirin's come into play ability goes on the stack, and my opponent now has 5 red pips, which means they've got a 6/5 Porphyros in play over there, and I do have 4 mana untapped. So with the ability on the stack, I decide to kill Porphyros, and I actually sack my Crucible, Winter Orb, Liquimetal Torque, and Mox Diamond. And the reason that I sack all that is because, first of all, Crucible has nothing. The Verdant Catacombs has fetched every black land that I have, and so I can't get anything else with that anyway. Winter Orb is actually hurting me quite a bit, more than it's hurting my opponent. Remember, my opponent has 0 cards in hand, so he's completely ignored the Winter Orb. Torque right now is the least powerful artifact I have. I need every blocker I can get. And Mox Diamond's really good, but I probably anticipate replaying Breya, and I'm going to need Soul Ring to do that. So at this point, Porphyros is gone, and so the Thopters do not get to ding me for damage, and nor do the Chandra's elementals get to hit me for damage. But my opponent could spit him into play. However, he decides not to attack and just puts a loyalty counter on Chandra instead. And then for my turn, I just draw Fact or Fiction, so I'm just going to hard cast it, and I take a pile of 4 over a Force of Negation. An interesting split, and I pass with 4 mana up. Opponent makes 2 1/1s with haste, and then goes to cast Pia's me, and then sends in with their creatures, and I end up blocking this way, which leaves 2 damage to my face. But before the damage hits, I go ahead and just sack and gain 5 life, and then Breya kills exactly 1 creature. I take all the damage, brainstorm at the end of their turn. I'm at 6, find an Omizawa's Jitte. And just like that, Jitte down, Breya equipped, attacking Chandra, take it down to 1 loyalty. And I then play Copy Artifact on Breya, keeping the new copy, which is untapped. I have 3 blockers and an Omizawa's Jitte with 2 counters on it, and I'm at 6 with a counterspell in hand against an opponent with exactly 1 card. And just like that, my opponent scoops it up. A little trick you can do with Breya and Copy Artifact. So I actually have my commanders in the command zone right now. But pretty cool stuff there. That was an insane game. It was incredibly dangerous. My opponent even had the ability to prevent me from blocking at one point in there. It's just all around scary. But managed to win the game essentially at 1 life. Came back from 1 life. So pretty good stuff. Anyway, now for the games against the Dream Crusher. The salty opponents, complaining about die rolls, mana crypt, says it's a 3.5 percenters. Congrats on your luck win without the die roll crypt. Blah, blah, blah. So this is the kind of opponent that I'm facing here. And my opponent, who's complaining about losing the die roll and mana crypt and such, is playing Baral mono blue. I have no sympathy for the mono blue player whatsoever. Anyway, so I lead off this way. You can see this is the old sword and the old Vandal Blast and such. Opponent runs out turn 1 Mana Crypt himself. So notice how he's complaining about my Mana Crypt. Not a word about his. It's classic. Like, it's just so classic. So many people do that. All right, runs out of Thawing Glaciers. Opts not to play their Brawl, so I'm going to test the waters with a Brainstorm. That seemed to work, so go ahead and just keep all those cards. I like them. And try to Vandal Blast their Mana Crypt here. It lands. I do not have to find a counter war over it. Very nice. So I'm going to play a Torque and pass. I could have gotten greedy and played the Torque. I could have tried to like play Brawl, make it an artifact creature and blast it, but it makes no sense to get that greedy. All right, end of turn, I'm going to just Enlighten Tutor here. I go get Winter Orb. Winter Orb's a very nice punish for Thawing Glaciers and for Mono Blue in general. Plus I have Sword of Feast and Famine over there waiting for me. And the only card I have left is a Counterspell at this point. Opponent has a Myriad Landscape, which is just another card getting hosed by Winter Orb, which is nice. Find myself at the ready. I can't play it without putting shields down from counter magic, so I consider whether or not I want to do it. I don't think I do. I think this is the turn my opponent concedes, actually. I think we're bugging out, but at any rate, opponent concedes very shortly here. I get some kind of a threat, and I end up equipping Sword, and he scoops it up. So we move on to game 2. And I win the die roll again. My opponent mentions that in chat. And solid keep. All right, remember last turn my opponent had Mana Crypt? Well, you know, they don't have tutors like I do, so there's no way. Oh, wait a minute, what's this? First turn Ancestral Vision and a Mana Crypt? Opponent does not, of course, mention how lucky he is, but rather chooses to mention how lucky I am for going first and having an answer to Mana Crypt. Of course, it is lucky, and that is true, but we were both lucky this game once again. Just one of those one-sided things. Anyway, so for my turn, I tutored up a Saga here because I've got the Sword, and I figure if I can get the Sword going, the Saga, I can, either way, I can kind of pressure my opponent with the Saga and force them to kind of interact. They don't have a great hand for doing that, so I'm going to go ahead and just play the Sword here, pass. And now I've got Saga Sword. My opponent is one turn away from getting their Ancestral off, and we know what 2 of their cards are. Opponent actually has like some kind of Stifle effect, Whirlwind Denial. Interesting card. Alright, so I don't get a I don't get a Construct that turn, but I do get one this time. I've got a Muddle, so I'm just gonna pass here. I want to try to stop the Ancestral Vision. So I go after the Vision here, and my opponent unfortunately does have a counterspell, but I know they've got the Condescend, and it is correct for them to tap out most likely for the Ancestral Recall here, but it does give me kind of free reign next turn, and I knew they had the Condescend, and that if they played it, they would have to play it. The reason I didn't equip the Sword, because I had the 3 mana untapped threatening them, so that kind of gives me an opportunity to sneak out of Breya, and then put Sword on, and then just kill their Baral right away. And they have a repeal for Construct. Shoot. So I can't actually do anything except equip Breya and pass. Opponent has Lotus into Baral. And 5 cards in hand. Condescend is gone. Aether Snatch, and who knows what the rest is. So, and literally all I've got is this Sword. But opponent has a Rift for Breya, so I'm going to go ahead and actually kill Baral and sack the Breya, and then just try to replay it and see if I can pull a counterspell out of my opponent's hand. Opponent does not counter, so I was hiding the land in my hand just in case they might have like a Treachery and think that they shouldn't counter. And as it turns out, my opponent has Vedalken Shackles, so it might have been why they allowed the Breya to resolve. But if you look, they've got 5 mana. Breya's a 4/4. So I have an interesting scenario here. If I equip Sword of Feast and Famine on Breya, and then my opponent attempts to steal it in response, then what I do is I can just sack. I can sack it and then put the sword on the Thopter, the one Thopter that'll be left. And so I actually need to do it with colored mana. So I use 2 mana to equip Breya. Opponent steals in response. I use 2 mana to sack Breya and a Thopter. Then I use the last 2 mana to equip the sword on the Thopter. Now, I can do this because I move the sword pre-combat. If my opponent doesn't steal it right at that time, then what happens is it's a 6/6 and they can't steal. And if they do that, I send in with all 3, and then they try to take like a Thopter, I'm just going to sack the Thopter. So that's not going to work out for them. So that's the plan, is equip, sack, equip, hit, untap all my lands, recast Breya, still have mana up to sack for the next round of Shackle's shenanigans. So, but my opponent just like doesn't respond here and is like, oh, I misclicked, and then concedes. Fair enough. Super interesting. I thought just the way that that worked out was really nice. Anyway, game 3 against the Dream Crusher. And I've got lots of good stuff here. Pota is, of course, still playing Baral. So, and it says 3 die rolls in a row. And so God leaves his angels or something along those lines. Anyway, I strip my opponent, play this Mana Vault here, and my opponent concedes. So, fair enough. All right, game 4. All right. So 4 in a row, because why? He's really like tilted now. So I just lead with Scrubland here. My opponent has Island and, once again, Mana Crypt. I have no idea if he had Mana Crypt 4 games in a row. This is 3 out of 4, by the way, with Mana Crypt. But I get End of Turn in Latent Tutor, Mox, Urborg, Necro. Boom, opponent scoops. It's like, I think that's 3 or 4 with Mana Crypt on my opponent's side. Notice, not a word about that, right? All right, game 5. So we start game 5, and I win the die roll. And because I win the die roll, he just concedes. I'm like, okay. So we start game 6. And finally, on the 6th game, my opponent wins the die roll. And, oh, no, that's not what happened in game 5, actually. He did not concede right away. We're going to go back and look at that. Anyway, but he finally wins the roll. So this is game 6. We'll go back to game 5 in a second. So he wins the roll, and of course he has, first turn Ancestral Vision, because it's Ancestral Vision and Crypts all the way down in his blue deck. But anyway, here I've got a very kind of clunky start, right? I thought the Skydiver would be good if my opponent had his Crypt again. At least I don't think he scooped. Maybe he did scoop on the last one. Anyway, opponent has got a really good start, obviously. Nothing I can really interact with. I don't have a lot going on. Pretty gnarly. So go for Lotus. He's got a free counter. Not good. I decide that I'm going to not fight over that. I'm going to try to fight over the Ancestral. So, and then I think about it and realize that if I do fight over the Ancestral, I'm fighting over, and I lose the fight, then I will be down so many cards that I just have like almost nothing going on. So I decided to approach it a different way and try to hold my force to where my opponent would counter something, and then I could like force it through, which is, I figure this is the turn, but my opponent actually has Counterspell Force of Will, so another free counter. Pitching a Daze, so they had a Daze, Force of Will, and Fierce Guardianship, and of course Mana Crypt, because, why not? Fortunately, I do have Urza Saga, so I can at least and I'm trying to figure out exactly how to do this. I decided to Deluge for 3 to try to draw out a counter. I do get a counterspell from that, and hoping that my opponent doesn't get to just throw a land away, because throwing a land away with Crucible is not exactly throwing a card away, but unfortunately I believe that's exactly what happens. Yep. So pass for the turn. The only hope really is that my opponent really can't swing in. I do have the Saga Sword going, and that might be enough. I have to actually let him Thawing Glaciers, but that's the least of my concerns. Alright, so I go for Saga, make a construct. Saga's so good here. Saga again, make another construct. And then tutor up a expedition map. Equip the construct and go to attack, and then my opponent has bounce, as I recall. So my opponent bounced the construct here. You just don't see it. I think we're going to bug soon. And no, I guess my opponent did concede, because I told my opponent, yeah, I keep sticking that turn 0 kill against you, which is winning the die roll. So my opponent had bounced the construct here, draws and passes. I sack the expedition map, and I go ahead and get Cavern of Souls, which is the card I got off of. Map is the card I got off of Saga. So I go get Cavern of Souls. Opponent says, sorry, I don't do cheat cards. Doesn't do cheat cards. And I don't know what to tell you, man. And then concedes. And then, of course, at that point, I would have had Breya uncounterable with a construct, slap a sword on it, smash in, attempt to take cards out of my opponent's hand. Pretty good stuff. And of course, I got Sphinx and then Sphinx again. So that was the epic saga of Dream Crusher, who apparently blocked me after that. So some really close games this evening, but interesting and fun. What do you think? You think I need to put a Braid back in? Do you think Night's Whisper makes sense as it is? Wooded Foothills is the last card in this deck, by the way. Kind of like trying to make the cards as big as possible so you can kind of like see them and get the deck list if you're interested. But yeah, do you think this makes sense? I'm feeling like it's probably okay. I feel like, the one thing that I noticed with I was doing a lot of kind of like top decking and like really close, like dump my hand and then not quite refilling at the rate that I wanted. And Night's Whisperer just helps with that. So I think it probably does need to stay. And if we're going to put a Braid in, it probably takes a different slot. But, again, interested in your thoughts. Maybe a Braid's not needed anymore. We've got the Prismatic Ending, Portable Hole. We've got Rip Apart. We've got Vandal Blast. We've got a lot of artifact kill that also kills creatures. Take out the Vandal Blast and all the rest, 1, 2, 3, already do. So, I don't know. And, of course, we've got Skydiver, Dak Fadent already. So maybe it's fine the way that it is. I think the Whisper is probably going to be a permanent fixture. I think that overall Whisper might actually be one of those cards that just you probably should just pick up Dark Confidant, Demonic Tutor, Night's Whisper. Like maybe there's a certain selection of black cards that just kind of belong all the time, and maybe this is it. But anyway, the video has gone long enough. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to your comments, and I'll see you next time.